How do you build a warm home in a place where fire cannot save you, where the sun vanishes for half the year, and the ground beneath your feet freezes as hard as poured concrete? Picture it for a moment, a single family, sitting together in the dark, waiting out a night that will not end for months, knowing that the walls around them are the only thing standing between their breath and the void. Somewhere in the high Arctic, people did not merely survive this place, they engineered it. And what they built was not a house at all. It was a machine, one precise enough and dangerous enough to kill the very people who created it. Remember that, because that hidden threat is the part almost no one sees coming. At 40 degrees below zero, the Arctic does not behave like a landscape. It behaves like a system patient, indifferent, and ruthlessly efficient at one single task, pulling heat out of anything that dares to hold it. Every exposed surface becomes a leak. Every breath, a small surrender. But here is the truth that changes everything. The truth these people understood in their bones. The real enemy was never the cold. It was motion. It was the wind, tearing away warmth faster than anybody could ever produce it. So the question was never how to stay warm. That was the easy question, the wrong question. The real question, the one their lives depended on, was how do you stop the loss before the system takes everything you have, including the ones you love? In almost every other place on Earth, survival follows one simple rule that we rarely stop to question. You build walls, you burn fuel, and you keep the heat coming in faster than it leaks out. It is a system of constant input, a fire fed endlessly against a loss you can never fully stop. But in the high Arctic, that logic does not just weaken, it collapses completely. Look to the horizon, and there are no forests, no timber to raise into beams, no wood to burn, no fire to lean on through the endless dark. Without fuel, heat cannot be sustained, and so a house built up on the surface becomes something worse than useless. It becomes a liability, a thin shell standing alone against an infinite heat sink, a structure that absorbs nothing, stores nothing, and does only one thing, bleed. Warmth pours out of it endlessly, into a world that never gives anything back. This is not a place where you can make heat and expect it to last. So instead of building upward, chasing a battle they could never win, they made a quieter and far more calculated move. They went down, not deep, not hidden away, just about a single meter into the earth. It sounds almost insignificant, a small shift barely worth mentioning, but in the Arctic, that small shift changes everything. Above the surface, the air is chaos, plunging from 40 below to 50 to 60 overnight, violent and unpredictable. Yet just beneath the active layer of soil, the physics quietly change. The ground stops swinging. It settles, holding steady near the freezing point of water, not warm, not comfortable, but survivable. And there was more waiting for them in that frozen ground. The permafrost was not an obstacle. It was a resource, a vast and silent reservoir of energy that resists sudden change. By pressing their homes into that dense mass, their walls stopped being thin layers of protection and became something else entirely, extensions of the earth itself, massive, immovable, constant. They never tried to destroy the cold, they simply stepped out of its chaos. But going down solved only half the problem, because even a buried home still has to meet the wind, and the wind is a thief unlike any other. When high-speed air strikes a surface, it does not simply pass by. It reorganizes itself, building a wall of high pressure on the side facing the storm, while carving out a vacuum of low pressure behind it. That imbalance becomes a force, a silent suction that reaches into the structure and pulls the warm air out through seams too small to see, through imperfections too subtle to ever feel with your hand. This is how heat truly disappears in the Arctic, not in a dramatic burst, but in a slow, continuous, silent leak. And here is where these builders revealed how deeply they understood their enemy. What if the structure gave the wind nothing to grab onto, no flat wall, no sharp edge, no surface to strike at all? So they kept the profile low and shaped the roof into a dome, and the wind, arriving with all its violence, found nothing to fight. It simply followed the curve, flowing over the surface, adapting to the shape instead of tearing at it. The pressure difference vanished. The suction died. The home did not resist the storm, it became invisible to it. And that was the answer to the question we asked at the very beginning. The true enemy was never the cold. It was motion. And motion had just been quietly defeated. But solving the wind only exposed a deeper problem, one with no obvious answer in a treeless world. How do you build the frame of a home when the very material that defines structure, wood, simply does not exist? There are no beams here, no planks, no straight lines to span a roof. And so the answer had to come from somewhere else entirely. It came from the ocean. A single bowhead whale carries tens of tons of natural architecture inside its body, a skeleton shaped by evolution to survive crushing pressure and endless motion. Its long, curved jawbones became natural arches, and an arch does something remarkable. Instead of bending and breaking under weight, it channels that force outward into pure compression, making it one of the most stable shapes ever discovered. The ribs formed a lattice. The great shoulder blades sealed the gaps, and layer by layer a dome rose from the earth. But to the people who built it, this was never just material. The whale was a gift from the sea, a creature that had died so that a family might live, and in every curved bone pressed into that frame there was something we too easily forget today: gratitude. Yet a frame of bone is only as strong as the bindings that hold it together, and in a world this cold, that was a problem that should have been impossible to solve. Most materials fail in extreme cold. They lose their flexibility, turn brittle, and fracture under the slightest strain in sub-zero air. Even strong things begin to behave like glass, waiting to shatter. But one material broke that rule entirely. Baleen, the great filtering plates from the whale's mouth, was a biological composite, evolved not for building, but for surviving the harshest ocean on Earth. It was flexible when wet, resilient under constant strain, and when the temperature dropped, it did something almost unbelievable. Instead of weakening, it tightened. Used as lashings to bind bone to bone, the baleen contracted as the cold deepened, and so the colder the world became, the more firmly the entire framework locked itself into place. Under the weight of snow and shifting loads, the structure could flex just enough to absorb the stress and then return, unbroken, to its shape. This was not rigidity. It was controlled movement, a home that survived force instead of merely resisting it. And by now the structure seemed almost perfect. The heat was held, the wind was defeated. The frame was locked in living tension. From the outside, the problem looked solved. But perfection hid a threat that could not be seen, only felt when it was already too late, and this was the danger we warned you about at the very beginning, the reason this home was as dangerous as it was brilliant. In a sealed space, oxygen quietly falls. Carbon dioxide rises with every breath, and most deadly of all, carbon monoxide, colorless, odorless, silent, seeps out of the very oil lamps that gave them their only heat and light. A structure raised to preserve life had also created the perfect conditions for suffocation. To survive their own design, these people had to master something even more invisible than heat itself, the movement of air. So the ventilation was never left to chance. It was engineered. Entrances were set low near the ground, openings placed high near the roof, and between them a subtle pressure gradient formed on its own. Warm air, lighter, rose and slipped out through the top, while cool, fresh air was drawn quietly in below to take its place, a continuous, invisible cycle, balanced and alive. The house breathed, and in that breath it kept them alive. Stop and sit with that for a moment. A people so precise that they did not only shape their walls and their warmth, but the very air moving through their lungs. And so, with everything working together at last, the buried walls, the invisible dome, the frame of bone locked in living tension, the house that breathed, consider what these people actually achieved. With nothing but a single small stone lamp burning seal oil, they sustained something that should not have been possible, an interior holding near 70 degrees Fahrenheit, while the world outside stayed locked at 40 below. That is a difference of more than 100 degrees, created without a furnace, without electricity, without a single material engineered in a factory. There was only geometry, mass, and a precise understanding of how energy moves through space. Heat was never made in excess here. It was preserved with intention, every surface and every curve working together to slow the loss and hold the warmth. This was not primitive survival. This was applied physics, executed with nothing but earth, bone, and human insight. And maybe that is the part we still struggle to grasp today. We live in a world that answers every problem with more fuel, more power, bigger homes, higher bills, energy poured out faster than we can even measure it. Yet these people with almost nothing proved a truth we seem to have forgotten. Survival was never measured by how much energy you can burn, but by how precisely you understand it. So if a home like this could exist built from frozen ground, the bones of a whale, and pure human instinct, it forces a harder question. What else have we misunderstood about the people who came before us? Because there are systems buried in our history that were never lost because they failed. They were lost because we simply stopped looking for them, and that is exactly what we go searching for here.